time. We're on time. Okay. On time? Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. In Taiwanese, welcome is Huang Ying. Oh, Mandarin. Sorry. In Korean, 환영. Yeah. In English, welcome. On behalf of Asian Center, I would like to welcome all of you to be here with us in this afternoon. Especially, I would like to welcome John, principal of the Knox College, John Visser, to be able to be here today. Asian Center was established in 1995 by Knox College, and it has worked faithfully and diligently with Knox College to fulfill its missions and visions for Asian Canadian churches. About 5 years ago, the Asian Center has changed its main focus to be a research center to provide visions and directions for the Asian Canadian churches. So today's gathering is the result of that passion to share our findings for the Asian Canadian churches with you. It is my prayer that may God reveal God's vision for the Asian Center, Asian Canadian churches, as we listen and pray together today. So welcome again, and let us pray. Lord God, you are the source of our life and the source of our wisdom and strength. We are gathered here to listen to your voice through your faithful servants who have completed their research, not as mere work, but as sacred ministries entrusted by you, Lord. As they have struggled to discern your will in their interviews and research, grant the listening ears to hear your voice, just like Elijah, who heard your voice in a sheer silence. Eternal God, give us prophetic voices for your churches. Help us to be a voice in the wilderness, preparing for your coming and leading for your churches. So here we are, Lord. Speak to us as we desire to listen. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I would like to invite Irene, one of our council members, to lead worship with us.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Let us stand as we sing the devotional hymn, and our pianist Grace will play the hymn once through. Let us begin. Lord, for the years your love has kept and guided, urged and inspired us, cheered us on our way, sought us and saved us, pardoned and brightened, Lord of the years, we bring our thanks today. Lord, for that word, the word of life which fires us, speaks to our hearts and sets our souls ablaze. Teachers and trains, rebukes us and inspires. receive your people's praise. Lord, for our land in this our generation, spirits oppressed by pleasure without care. For young and old, for this every nation, Lord of our land, be pleased to hear our prayer. Lord, for our world, when we disown and doubt Him, loveless in strength and comfortless in pain, hungry and helpless, lost indeed without Him, Lord of our world, we pray that Christ may reign. Lord, for ourselves, in living power make us serve on the cross and Christ on the throne. Past behind us, for the future take us, Lord of our lives, to live for Christ alone. Thank you. Please be seated. And now, may I invite Principal John Fisses to give us our devotion address.
Let me begin by just adding a word of welcome to all of you. As principal of Knox College, I'm always delighted to welcome guests, visitors, and friends into our space as a college. And I'm particularly delighted to do so today because we are very excited about this particular project. One of the things that I pray for our college is that we will increasingly be thought leaders in providing research and scholarship and service to the church in the very kinds of projects that this project represents. So it's a delight to be here today. Unfortunately, I have to slip away for a little while to a meeting at TST, the board meeting where we're approving budgets for next year. So pray for me. But I will slip away and then I will return. I want to read from the letter to the Ephesians and offer a few thoughts based on this text as we begin this time of reporting and conversation and study together. So reading from Ephesians chapter 3, verses 1 to 12. This is the reason that I, Paul, am a prisoner for Christ Jesus for the sake of you Gentiles. For surely you have already heard of the commission of God's grace that was given me for you, and how the mystery was made known to me by revelation, as I wrote above in a few words, a reading of which will enable you to perceive my understanding of the mystery of Christ. In former generations, this mystery was not made known to humankind, as it has now been revealed to his holy apostles and prophets by the Spirit. That is, the Gentiles have become fellow heirs, members of the same body, and sharers in the promise in Christ Jesus through the gospel. Of this gospel I have become a servant according to the gift of God's grace that was given me by the working of his power. Although I am the very least of all the saints, this grace was given to me to bring to the Gentiles the news of the boundless riches of Christ, and to make everyone see what is the plan of the mystery hidden for ages in God who created all things, so that through the church the wisdom of God in its rich variety might now be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. This was in accordance with the eternal purpose that he has carried out in Christ Jesus our Lord, in whom we have access to God in boldness and confidence through faith in him. I pray therefore that you may not lose heart over my sufferings for you. They are your glory. Whenever I read this section of Scripture, I read the passage, in this passage, the intriguing word mystery. This word mystery just leaps off the page, and it's used by the apostle 4 or 5 times in chapter 3, depending on the translation that you're using. In verse 3, he says, and I quote, "The mystery was made known to me by revelation." In verse 4, he says, he speaks about his understanding of the mystery of Christ. In verse 5, he notes that the mystery has been revealed to apostles and prophets by the Spirit. And in verse 9, he says that this mystery has been hidden through the ages until the coming of Christ. In fact, one of the commentators on this letter to the Ephesians suggests that Paul's entire letter could be framed by this idea, by the idea of mystery. Earlier in chapter 1, verse 9, near the beginning, Paul says that God has made known the mystery of his will according to God's good pleasure set forth in Christ. And in the very last chapter, near the very end of the letter, he asks for prayer that he might make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel, even while he is in prison. Mystery. What is this mystery about which the apostle writes? Well, according to his own words, it is the mystery of God's will, hidden for ages, now made known by revelation, that in and through Christ, we Gentiles, non-Jews, have been included in and incorporated into God's plan of salvation. When we think about it, it doesn't seem like much of a mystery to us today. We simply think 2,000 years later that that's the way it is, or that that's the way it ought to be. But we need to constantly remind ourselves that in the first century, in the context of Palestinian Judaism, in the life of the early Christians, this was a radical message. And it was totally unexpected that God's plan of salvation in Christ includes all, even those previously thought to be excluded. The early church, as I'm sure you all know, struggled with whether the salvation brought by Jesus was really for Jews only, whether Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. And if you think about it, Paul, a Pharisee of Pharisees by his own description, should have believed that, but did not. He fashioned himself rather as an apostle to the Gentiles in response to the call of God and his own deep conviction that Jesus the Messiah brought in a new age in which there was neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. And that's really the burden of the apostles' theology throughout Ephesians. In chapter 2, he argues there's no longer a separation, a wall between Jew and Gentile. He says Jesus Christ has broken down that middle wall of partition between the Jew, the righteous, and between the Gentile, those who seemed unrighteous. And that in and through Jesus Christ, God was creating a new humanity, redeeming humanity to be one in Christ. Or to quote the New Testament scholar Tom Wright, the Gentiles have been made righteous, or as a verb, been righteous in Jesus Christ. We have all been included. And the third chapter then ends with a prayer that Paul's readers, Jew and Gentile, as he says, every family in heaven and on earth will be filled with the presence of Christ and able to grasp the truth of their Redeemer's love. And between the declaration in chapter 2 and the prayer of chapter 3, Paul interrupts himself, as it were, to explain this mystery clearly in case the recipients of this letter didn't quite get it. This mystery which stands at the center of the gospel, this mystery which constitutes the heart of his ministry, this mystery which has been entrusted to him, that they, the Gentiles, the Greeks, those outside of the Old Testament promises of God, are in fact included in them. And so I want to suggest, friends, that as we engage in ministry today, the significance of this phrase, the mystery of the gospel, should always be before us. First of all, it's a constant reminder that all people are included in the gospel, all the peoples, or as Matthew's gospel puts it in the so-called Great Commission, panta ta ethne, all the peoples, all the nations. This means that the gospel, the good news, and don't miss this, is by its very nature intercultural, or cross-cultural, or multicultural. That is, it is not something that we add on to the gospel because we think it's a good idea that all people should be included in this. It's not an implication of the gospel. It's not an application of the gospel. It is the gospel. The late Lamin Sanneh reminded us that the genius of the Christian message, the genius of the gospel, is its translatability across cultures, across languages, across generations. And the universality of the gospel is rooted in the very way the gospel is indigenized in particular cultures and contexts, and afresh in every generation. And so what that means for us, at least for me, is that intercultural studies, such as the one being reported on today, are not simply about the practical application of the gospel, although they are about that, but they are about the very heart of the message which we claim. God's love for all, including second-generation Asians in the Greater Toronto area. In short, the intercultural ministry of the church is grounded in the intercultural mystery of the gospel. But there's one other point of reflection I want to leave with you before I conclude, and that is this. The word mystery in the Greek is mysterion, no mystery there. But in the Latin Vulgate, it's translated as sacramentum, a word you might also recognize, the word from which we get our English word sacrament. And so when Paul speaks about the mystery of the gospel, he's talking about something that was previously not known, now has been revealed. Something invisible has been made visible. The sacrament of the gospel. The mystery of the gospel, that the Gentiles are included with Jews in the promises of God, has been revealed in the concrete reality of humanity. in the incarnation of the Word. Paul believed that the mystery of the gospel, hidden in ages past, hinted at through prophets, throughout the history, the life, and the witness of Israel, was now fully revealed, made known, incarnated, sacramentalized in Jesus Christ. Something previously invisible is now made visible. A sacrament is a visible sign of an invisible grace, to quote Augustine. And the mystery of the gospel, God's love for all humanity and all creation, God's plan for the redemption of all things, even creation in its groaning, that God reigns over all, this mystery is made known and revealed in this sacramentum, this reality of the incarnation of Jesus Christ. And this reminds us that the gospel is not a theory or just a great idea that everyone should be included, but it deals with concrete reality in the midst of real life with real people. The intercultural ministry of the church is always and always ought to be an incarnational ministry. It's not just a hope that all are included. It's not a theory. The gospel is this reality practiced in communities of faith of diverse cultures across generations. And so today, as we gather in this place to hear, to consider, to talk about the results of this study, this important work that's been done, I want to suggest to you that we are doing gospel work. And for that, thanks be to God. Amen.
Good afternoon. My name is Dong Ha Kim. I'm the Interim Director of Academic Programs and Director of the Asian Center here at Knox College, and I'm one of the researchers who've participated in this project. We have a few minutes actually for me to do some, put things in order as we speak. This research presentation actually has a longer name. I should point out that A Church of Today for Tomorrow, in essence, summarizes what it's about. But nonetheless, this, before we actually get into the details of this research, I need to say that there are a couple of acknowledgements that we need to make at this point. That is, this research as a whole was made possible certainly by each and every community that have participated in it, but in particular, there are two institutions that I thought I should bring to your attention. A big chunk of the financial support was made possible by the Louisville Institute in Kentucky. It's a generous organization with generous support for specialized researches, grants, and so forth, and a lot of the other academic endeavors. So we are certainly very much indebted and feel very privileged that the Institute has acknowledged this particular project to take place at Knox College, and in particular the Asian Canadian immigrant churches in Canada. And secondly, the Center for Asian Theology and Ministry, located in Knox College. Part of Knox College, the center with the Knox College have also been instrumental in both, obviously, provision of the venue, but through the many faculty and staff who've assisted, and through financial contributions towards the research itself. So not exclusive, but certainly noticeable mention of those who've supported this particular project. So thank you. Yeah. This particular section, we will get into through some introduction of the research itself and presentation of some of the actual data. So my task at this point will be to introduce the brief background of the research itself before I hand this off to our lead researcher. And so Asian Canadian churches of today for tomorrow. Challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. So how did this project really come about? Well, to say that, oops. Thank you. This is the time when I really should spell out the full detailed thank you. Title of the research that was certainly presented at the various institutions. So really, this is what you would read. Asian Canadian churches of today for tomorrow. The challenges and opportunities for Asian Canadian immigrant churches with first and second generation congregants. A qualitative study of Chinese, Taiwanese, and Korean churches in the Greater Toronto Area. So Asian Canadian immigrant churches, we just short form that to ACIC. Okay, so how did this research come about and what piqued the interests of the researchers? Well, we really have to look at the demographic aspect of the Asian Canadian immigrants in general, that the three communities mentioned, the Taiwanese, Chinese, and Korean, to be select, are alike in many ways, in particular that we share many of the social, historic, and cultural aspects, and certainly the immigration patterns as we see it. The entry points may have been a little different, but what we've observed that in recent few decades, there have been some dramatic changes in the demographics. First, that the immigration pattern has really dwindled to a stop in some cases. That has resulted in a decrease of newly arrived first generation immigrants and in return an aging population of the second and beyond generation of people in these respective communities. And so that's a big impact on many of the institutions and within these communities. In particular, well, the Asian Canadian immigrant churches, of which the large populace are from those demographics. So what that demographic change has meant was that within these congregations, well, we have a same pattern, an increasing or aging first generation immigrant population in the churches, and vis-a-vis an increasing number of second generation folks in the congregations. So in light of that context, one of the first things that these congregations have done was to have basically two different services under the same roof. A lot of them have decided to stay together. So the ethnic language, whatever that may be, of the first generation parents and grandparents are basically worshiping the same ethnic languages. And at the same time or at a different time, but nonetheless within the same complex. The second generation and beyond were encouraged to have worship services in English. So multi-generation, multi-language services under the same roof. So that sort of dynamic, the demographic dynamic, both within the communities and our congregations, we felt was a very unique moment in time that we needed to know just what exactly is happening, and as a result, what are the challenges and opportunity for the Asian Canadian immigrant churches at this time? Because research-wise, no one has really taken the impetus to take a look at this picture right here, right now, and say just what is exactly happening, what sort of challenges are being brought about, and what sort of opportunities lie waiting for the community and the congregations to explore. Why? Because the future so much depends on the congregations reflecting and exploring where they are and perhaps where they need to go. And thus the impetus for this research. So basically, the core question being, what are the challenges and opportunities for the Asian Canadian immigrant churches? Well, there are two aspects that the research has examined, and that is, first and foremost, the responses and of the first generation ethnic members and the second generation, often English-speaking members, were conducted, researches were conducted, and the responses examined. And at the same time, endeavor was made to compare the responses provided by these two generations in each communities to see if there are any correlations or differences, similarities between the different communities, Taiwanese, Chinese, and Korean. So out of this whole project, there are many decisions, many conclusions, and many things that we have come to observe. But if you look at it in terms of the broad perspective, when we began this project, there were some questions, what did we really hope to obtain by embarking on this project in itself? Well, there's some three general, by not means exclusive or conclusive, but you know what? We are aware that in the past, such studies have been carried out in the respective communities at hand. This particular research, we felt, was an opportunity for the Asian Canadian immigrant churches to really engage one another's context, engage one another in a critical way, in a dialogue format. So that aspect is quite new. And secondly, whatever data that we would gather, whatever conclusions we arrive, we are really, we feel, getting a more comprehensive picture of the issues facing immigrant churches in particular. And finally, what we do, however big, however small, we are adding to that picture of all of us working together to reimagine the future of the churches, not just in Asian Canadian immigrant churches, but in churches across North America. So broad, but I think these are very important aspects that we were looking forward to in embarking on this research. So let's look at the methodology of this research that was undertaken. So, and for some of you, this would be quite new and interesting just how we went about. So basically, we went out and interviewed folks from the three respective communities. Our database for phase one, and I'll show you that there are two phases, consisted of 30 members in total, the number 30. And that's an interesting number because that number 30, we can break down into various categories. First, we can break it down in terms of gender, 15 male and 15 female, just to balance things out. And secondly, on generations, so the first and second and beyond generation. So from each of the communities, Chinese, Taiwanese, and Korean, we selected 5 first-generation members, 5 second-generation members. So 10 from each community, all add up to 30. So secondly, generation. So, and thirdly, language breakdown. So obviously 3 communities, but multiple languages. And so in the end, this is what we basically ended up. These are not exactly equal across the board, but 3 from Cantonese speaking members, 4 from Mandarin, and 3 Taiwanese, 5 Korean, and 15 English speaking across the board. And they all add up to 30. So the number 30 is broken down into a number of interesting categories. Now, in the second phase of our research, well, let me backtrack a bit. The first phase was targeted just lay members of the congregations, first or second generations, non-ordained personnel. Having done that, the researchers felt that, you know what, this is really quite a good trend here. It's too good to stop at this point. And to get a real fuller picture of what's happening, the researchers then on and went to interview 20 more participants. Now, this part, well, we focused on the ministers or pastors from each of the communities. So basically, 10 from the ethnic language churches, those who practiced in ethnic languages, and 10 from the English-speaking pastors. Okay. The main means of gathering data for our research was through the interviews. So questions were carefully designed for each participants to be engaged. And I should assure you that the methodology of engaging each person from the community, the ethics of that methodology has been approved through the ethics board of the University of Toronto, so that all the T's were crossed and I's dotted and so forth. So basically, the interviews took place at the respective congregations where the participants worshiped. We try to make sure that happened for a number of reasons. But in some cases, some of the interviews did take place at Knox College. So between those two, the interviews took place. And these interviews were generally, or they range generally from 1 to 2 hours. They consisted of 2 parts. First part, 22 questions of demographics, you know, your age, your background, your citizenship, that sort of thing, to get us a general picture. And then part 2 consisted of 13 actual questions that were used for the research in itself. By methodology-wise, the interviews were recorded digitally and later transcribed, all of course with the participants' permission. Where it entailed ethnic languages, they were first translated and then transcribed. So you can appreciate the extent of the work involved. Many, many hours of, I feel for the transcribers and translators. It's a lot of work, really. So, and of course, the resulting transcribed notes were then analyzed using a particular software called QSR NVivo. And so that software allows a social researcher to go through a transcription, isolate particular themes, and are then able to see which particular areas are of particular concern and so forth. So it's a very useful software. Anyway, and of course, these categorized themes were later compared. So all of these steps were taken to ensure that the research was as systematic, as consistent, fair, ethical, and so forth, and full of integrity in what we are trying to achieve. So those were the things that were undertaken to arrive at this. And having said that, there were 4 researchers who were involved in it, and myself, Nam Soon, just wave if you, yeah. Ben Kuo, and In Yi Kim. So 4 of us were the primary researchers. That said, the field work involving our actual going out and interviewing, we did some of that too. But there were others who are not here today, Wes Chang, Eric Lee, who were very helpful and instrumental in helping us get the actual hard data, the grunt work. And this took quite a bit of time, as you can imagine, on top of our regular work, traveling all over GTA. And this day and age with the traffic, it's no easy task. So we put quite a mileage on our cars, at least to say. So, yes. With that methodology, you can imagine the mountain of data that we have acquired. And so I'm going to hand the mic over to Nam Soon, who is then going to take you through the research. Would you like that? Okay.
Nice to see you all. Even though we do not have much time, I would like to particularly recognize the Reverend Wes Chang, who interviewed and transcribed the Chinese, Mandarin, and also Taiwanese, and then some English in Cantonese. So he was not able to be here today with us, but I like to, instead of him, I like to recognize Grace Chang, his wife, then she can tell. Yeah, you can deliver our thanks. In this research, samples were only with 2 or 3 different languages, 2 or 3 different languages worship services with adult. So as Thomas says, that's all we have. And in terms of age, you can see we always we think English service for only children. That's our mindset, or young adult. But you can see their ages, not much different between ethnic language participant and English language participant. So English language participant 20s a little more, have more than ethnic languages, but still we have 80s, age 80s, and 50s and 40s, you can see there. So we have to change that mindset first. English service is for all ages, not only children or young adult. Then this is the age, average age. So you see that not much different. Ethnic language is 63. That's the average Chinese, for Chinese is 63. And also Korean 44 and Taiwanese 66. but English also 37, 38, and 41. Then also average age to Canada and average years living in Canada, just for our reference. So we can see that for Koreans, years of living in Canada are much shorter than Chinese or Taiwanese. And status in Canada, mostly legally Canadian, 90% are Canadians. And denominational affiliation of participants, 67% are Presbyterians because of our long building relationship with Presbyterians. And years of membership and years of attending at the current church. What we see here, Chinese congregation are more stable and staying longer than Koreans. And Koreans are more movable because their membership is, current church is just half of that church membership. So we can see that Korean congregations are more movable, move to other churches. They like to move around. And also, this interesting part is that Taiwanese English congregation are really stable, lifelong membership at that church. That's a very interesting part too. They do not move around. They just stay there, and they have their ownership there. And positions and responsibilities in the church. We can see how committed our samples are. So 98% have some positions and responsibilities. And here says ethnic language is 61% elders and deacons, and English language is 23% elders and in various positions and responsibilities they have. And worship with family at the same church, that's the 83% worships with family at the same church. And this is just for interest. All Korean is 100% in Korean language they worship, but Chinese is Mandarin is 40, and then Cantonese is 60. But in Taiwanese, there is also 20% Mandarin speaking congregations. So that makes even. And percentage of understanding the worship service in other languages. That's the important part, I think. Ethnic congregation understand better other language, which is English. Then English language understand ethnic languages. So that means ethnic languages, congregations need to accommodate English language congregations. And gender of ministers participant, you will wonder. It demonstrates where we are in terms of our ministers' gender. We really wanted to make balance, gender balance, but it was not possible because there was non-female lead minister in the church, in Asian church yet. We made balance with lays 50-50, 15-15, exactly. But ministers, it's very difficult. So, country of birth for ministers, ethnic language ministers, of course, or outside in Canada. English ministry also is interesting. Outside of Canada is a 60%. That's interesting. In Canada, only 40%. So we like to bring ministers from outside of Canada. That's the interesting part. But country of birth for English ministers, then where are they from? They are from India, Korea, USA, Taiwan. That's the 60%. And age to Canada, just I like to pass this one, and age to ministers came to Canada, and status of ministers in Canada, mostly 85% are Canadian citizens. And denominations of 70% are Presbyterian, but 15 non-denominational and 10 independent, and associated gospel is the 5%. Years of ordination and years of serving current church. Here we see here, years of ordination and years of serving current church. What we see here is a Chinese EM English ministry leadership seems more stable. Congregations are also stable, also leadership also stable. You can see there. And then Taiwanese leadership shows not quite stable. In different, and Korean ministers are shorter experience in the ministry than Chinese EM ministries. So what we see here is that in a different sense, we can say Taiwanese churches might have better opportunity to change to a new direction. There is a hope. So don't be frustrated. There is a hope. And language of distribution, I will go to there. Identity to be formed among congregants. 15 ministers hope their congregation form Christian identity, religious identity. Or one minister says Canadian identity, 2 ethnic identity, 2 is not one identity, but wide, broad identity. Of course, many ministers said it is very difficult to separate out, to segregate between Christian identity and ethnic identity. But we had to push very hard. But which one is the most important for you? Then they chose religious and Christian identity. And importance of presence of Asian immigrant churches in Canada, accommodating immigrant. That was the most high number, but much more than that. I think in that language, there are so many things. They see the importance. Also, there is sending missionaries and all those numbers. Yeah. So lay person is 15, but ministers was male 90 and female 10. Even that 10%, we had to make that 10%. Otherwise, it would have been all 100% male ministers. We had to make. They are not quite qualified for our criteria, but we had to push. And country of birth, we already talked, and then country of birth, like lay people, they were born, 67% born in Canada, but ministers, only 40% were born in Canada, in English ministry. This time, what I'm going to tell you, what is going on now in Asian immigrant churches in Canada, particularly worshiping 2 or 3 language services under the same roof. And You see there are all names of under the quotations, names would appear, but those names are not real names. We all have to change to anonymize the person who spoke that. So they are not real names. So don't think about that might be the person. So, but I will say just what's going on now. And then at the panel, we are going to talk about what can we do for the future. That will be in at the panel. Several common words I can bring is a home, family, comfortable, next generation, one church. Those words come very often, very frequently. So you see that still we are in foreign land. So home, family, comfortable, next generation, and one church. And I could see first generation's enthusiasm for second generation ministry, and then for the church for next generation. Then we asked, why do you attend this ethnic specific church, although your first language is English, and also some of their English is no problem to understand, to participate in English service. And why are they coming to ethnic specific church? The first reason was the same culture and identity. Particularly was interesting amongst the second generation English congregations, some identified themselves more traditional ethnic and strong desire to retain their ethnic culture and language. A church is only place they can learn their culture and language. They attend ethnic churches for the passion, the warmth, and core values, hardworking attitude, of course, the food, and the sense of closeness. They attend ethnic churches. That is the first reason. And second reason was the relationship. The relationship with friends from the same ethnic background and with family members at the same church. That was the second reason. Long relationship for a long time, some whole life. Like Taiwanese English members, they never change. So it seems like. And the third reason was leadership opportunities, which are not found elsewhere. If they move to another church, if they attend another church, they cannot find that opportunity to serve the church. So this, in turn, serving the church becomes a source of strength for their life in Canada. The next reason is a faith, a sense of a spiritual and psychological home, or a sense of God's call for the church. I think it's ministers who does ministry with these congregations would be very happy. And the church is the only place where they can feel at home. That is what they say. Also, church's name is not the real church's name. We all changed with the old trees. So many trees, different kind of trees. Then another reason is the family-like closeness within the church. So we are just like a family. Although through this, the two generations can learn about each other, from each other's culture, then feel deeply connected to those sharing similar values and upbringings. So that was another reason, as a sharing of common ethnic experiences, like upbringings, and a greater sense of belongingness. They have a greater sense of belongingness in ethnic churches, where else they cannot have. So immigrant churches, as the root of where they are from, they feel distinct cultural bond in ethnic churches. Then we asked, what strengths ACIS have? What strengths we have? Then strengths, first strength is both the lay and clergy interviews considered being able to accommodate the different generations, cultures, and languages as the major strength of having 2 or 3 language services. In addition, the ethnic immigrant churches help address certain ethno-culturally specific needs of second and third generation children who are raised in a bicultural environment. The school and Canadian culture and home and ethnic culture. Another strength is that families can come together to the same church. So that creates important bonding between family members. And family members feel most at home and comfortable in ethnic churches. And the other strengths, they said, passing on the faith from generation to generation, which is the most valuable strength they see. Like sharing stems of faith and pass on their faith to the next generation. And also, along with the faith, they pass on the values and roles and lessons of the ethnic immigrant churches. Another strength is interactive learning opportunities for different generations and language groups. I think it's from the different generations. So that's they learn from young generation. At the church, they can learn what second generations think, then how they do in certain things. So both generations, they can learn in the church. And then another strength, they say, is the growth of the church. So they can invite their friends and family, and then also they can bring next generation of English speaking, and they can invite also English speaking friends and family as well. So more broadly open opportunities to the church. That's something connects what we said earlier, but still we can say connecting both ethnic language congregant and English congregant to their roots. By sharing similar experiences, like such as ethnic food and cultural home holidays, such as Lunar New Year days, things like that. So through that, they can help second generation form a hybrid identity. That's the also strength. And what strengths they would like to preserve to be healthy church in the future. That's what they said. A supportive family-like community, the local and global mission initiatives, cell group or small group ministry, ethnic ties and cultural specific element, commitment to the church, reaching out into the community at large, and a joint session. Of course, there was also joint service as well. The ethnic language service and Bible-centered life. And the last one was strong spirituality and love for one another. Those strengths they would like to keep. Of course, there are strengths, but also there must be challenges as well. As you guess, what would be the first challenge? As you guess and experience, communication is the most difficult challenge, which comes from the language and cultural barriers. They have to have joint meetings and services and ministry programs and activities. But while they are trying to have those together, they face communication difficulties. And also sometimes miscommunication leads to misunderstanding each other. And not only miscommunication, also they feel a general lack of communication between language groups. We'll talk about that at the afternoon later sessions, communication and culture, more in detail. Then second challenge is the cultural differences. Not only outsiders are same, appearance are same, but their thinking system is different. And communication style is different. Desirable attitude also is different. Fashion style also is different, such as hair coloring, and then we have to greet each other doing 인사, 안녕하세요. All those things so makes them difficult. That's the challenging part. Then third challenge, although two generations want to coexistence, but generational disconnect between two congregations is challenging. Having two different services seems like creating separate identities. And ethnic ministry does not know what's going on in English ministry. And also, English ministry does not know what's going on in ethnic ministry. Although English ministry congregant, they like to help ethnic ministry activities or programs, but they do not know how to, because they do not have any information of other language ministries. They feel like two different entities. Then other challenge comes from leadership of lay and clergy. Small pool of leadership and difficult to find suitable leaders. I guess that's why many churches went to the south to get their ministers, English ministers. So, and building working partnership between pastors due to the hierarchical power structure of the Asian cultures, particularly with the senior ministers and English lead pastors, like that. And also sometimes they feel like they are working for two congregations. So it's easy to burn out from double burden and double workload. And the other challenge was mentioned, was not mentioned only from first generation. Also, it was mentioned from English ministry as well, So, lacking that is lacking a sense of church ownership of a second generation or English ministry congregant. There are concerns even from English congregants how they can take over leadership, which might need very soon. Since much less immigrant from home countries and aging first generations, how we can take over that leadership. Also, this one is connected to the previous one, mistreatment of the EM congregation. It connects with that. Another challenge for EM to grow is the mistreatment of the EM congregations from first generation. EM's voice was not heard well. And they feel like they never given priority. Like example, that was not only said by English ministry members. Ethnic language ministry interviewees say the same thing. Like example, sharing building. Who has sanctuary? If you have auditorium and basement and sanctuary, who has a sanctuary? Yes, of course, ethnic congregation has sanctuary. And English congregation, even though they really like to have worship service as sanctuary, always they are in either basement or auditorium. That's what they feel. So, like they feel like they were treated as a child or second class. So they like to be treated equally, equal rights and equal respect, regardless of age. That's an important word we need to remember. Then, reading all these transcripts, I was reminded very traditional Asian culture, father and son relationship. Father loves their son very much, but they never express. That's not right to express I love you and hug their son. It was traditionally, that was like. So I was kind of, because the first generation, really, they love the second generation. English ministry, they really like to growth of English ministry, but they do not express, or they cannot express their love for the second generation, for the next generation. Then, what changes they like to see in Asian immigrant churches? They like to see open and transparent communication between the lay leaders and clergy. Also, they like to see also better working relationship between senior pastor and associate pastors. Becoming more proactive about serving the local community. A missionary-minded church they like to see. Missionary-minded church with the lay-centered leadership. And the third was becoming a truly unified church between English ministry and ethnic language ministries by fully embraces English ministry congregate. Then, how can we, yes, we have challenges, but all churches have challenges, which might be a different kinds. Every church has challenges, right? Then how can ethnic church with EM turn challenges into opportunities? First, they think moving forward in a multicultural or multi-ethnic direction. They think this way is as creating an opportunity, like sharing by sharing with inviting other friends and opening doors to all people will help nurture a multicultural congregation. That's what believe. And also interesting part, although there is some difficulty in communication, but still they think a regular joint service will help, will turn into the opportunity to worship together, to make one congregation in Christ. Because they like to create more opportunities for frequent interactions between different congregations, like such as joint church event, joint church activities, like joint mission trips, church-wide summer retreat, something like that. Then learning, another opportunity they see is from challenges, learning from each other's strengths and mistakes. They learn from each other. The different ministries can complement one another by working together and sharing gift and talent. EM congregants, despite the challenge they face, still value their coming together as family and relations with those of the same ethnic root. Now, just 1 minute, think about, imagine, or predict your church 25 years from now. How that would be like. 25 years from now, your church, you are attending or you are serving. 25 years from now, how that church would be. Now, with your that imagination, I'd like to show how do the lay and clergy envisage for the future of immigrant churches. It's interesting. Ministers, out of 20 ministers, multi-ethnic, 10 ministers predict or imagine the multi-ethnic church, multicultural church. And then lay people, 13 out of 30, 13 people imagine the multi-ethnic church. And that means 9 out of 15 EM lay imagine the multi-ethnic church. And then 6 out of 10 EM pastors also imagine the multi-ethnic church. In order to move to multicultural church, interviews emphasize the need to be a more welcoming church with open mind. And interesting part is you will see ethnic group also 3, and lay also 3 people, and ministers also 3 people said would be saved. But otherwise, mostly they imagine English ministry dominant. And then it will be kind of opposite from now. Like English ministry dominant, and then ethnic ministry will be small, shrink and small. Almost half of ethnic language interviews predicted that there will be no ethnic congregation in 25 years. Do you believe that? That is almost half of them said. So, see, these are mostly like moving toward multi-ethnic churches or multicultural churches. More colored faces, different nationalities, not on beyond Asians. And many interviews, particularly Taiwanese and Cantonese speaking congregations, they think they need to develop Mandarin service in their church. That is the priority to stay as a healthy church. But interesting, it was very hopeful for me was not a single EM interviews indicated his or her interest in leaving the current church to start an independent church. Rather, they would like to help build a multicultural congregation in their ethnic churches. They are more hopeful and expect to a different form of a church in the future. The key. After all this, one image came to my mind was a key of a storeroom. When I was young, was growing up in Korea, almost every house had that storeroom to store crops and fruits, vegetables, to live all those long and cold winter. This is the storeroom. And what do you see here? The key. It's a key. Who has the key for the room? Who had the key for the room, for the storeroom? Eh? Eh? Who had the key? Master. Who is the master then? Mother. Mother or mother-in-law, right? Mother, or in a different words, mother-in-law was the key bearer, key holder. And after bringing in daughter-in-law, mother-in-law trains that daughter-in-law and then seek a right time to turn over her key to her daughter-in-law. Wise mother-in-law would turn over the key just the right time. It is very simple key. That's not like a fancy key like today's. That's the very simple key. But that has power. Then when is the right time for ethnic churches to turn over their keys to English ministry? Thank you.
As Donga mentioned, we have gone through extensive and rigorous research, not only interviews, but analyzing the data, and also translating all the ethnic language into English took a lot of time. And also, we don't just look at the data, but we kind of process those data through the software program, and so that we can understand what are the key concepts. And these are the findings that we have. The findings that we presented to you, it is up to you now to interpret it. It's an endless possibility of interpreting what is going on. We have a raw data with us, but how do we interpret this raw data into understanding of our situation? And also, not only understanding of our situation, but for the vision of the future Asian Canadian immigrant churches. I think this is really exciting time. It's the first time that we do, I mean, this is second presentation, but as a church as a whole, this is the first time that we do it here in Canada. So I really am excited hearing about group discussion, what you have come up with. And then after that, from 4:45, 4 panelists will have more in-depth interpretation with the data. So for now, with Namsun's presentation with the data, each group had a good, fruitful discussion, I believe. So each group facilitator will come forward and then present it. And then we'll take a break. So we have 4 to 4:30, but it's already 10 after 4. So try to be as precise, but meaty. Important information that you got from the group, please present to the whole group so that we can all understand. So which group you want to start with? Yes, please. And then please do it here because camera only, yeah, so.
Okay, so for our group, for the first question in terms of what was new from this presentation, firstly, we were just surprised at some of the differences within the ethnic groups, how the Taiwanese church, the consistency of members, and then in the Korean church, how there were a lot of church hoppers. But we were also surprised by the similarities in some of the groups, that a lot of them had that same sense of home, that same sense of familiarity. And we were also surprised by that notion that people thought that the ethnic church would be gone in 25 years. That kind of surprised a lot of us. And that was a little bit new because we hadn't really, those of us in the room hadn't really thought that. And then another interesting part was how the ethnic church is morphing and how it's changing just through the generations. For the second question of what findings from the research gave us hope for our church, one was the passing of power and just the illustration that Dr. Song used at the end, and that's just the eagerness of the first generation to pass on to the second generation. We found that very hopeful, as that was consistent across the board. And then also the shifting of focus from the ethnic congregation being kind of the main parent organization to bringing the English congregation into the forefront. And we found that very hopeful, that that was also something that was expressed by the ethnic groups themselves. And so just in general, hope. The hope that the gospel itself is intercultural and multicultural. There's the talk that Dr. Vissers gave as well, just tying in with that notion that, yeah, there's a hope for the future ethnic church was something that came out. Thirdly, the questions that came out from this presentation. One question was, what are the models that can be applied to churches in order to pass that key or that power from the EM, from the ethnic groups to the EM? And we know that it's the ideal and it's amazing, but what would that look like? And we also mentioned that these days there's a lot of the models where the English congregation just tends to leave, kind of patriate themselves and expatriate themselves and leave the church itself. But what are some other models that besides that can come up in the future? And other questions that came were, there were studies done on larger ethnic, the study was done and a lot of studies focus on the larger ethnic groups like the Chinese and the Korean, but what about the smaller ethnic groups like the Taiwanese, Vietnamese, the minority of the minorities? How do we engage those ethnic communities, and how do the larger ethnic groups really work to partner with those smaller ethnic groups to work in partnership through these changes in the generations? And another question that came up was, how can we become a multicultural and multi-ethnic congregation? How long will it take? That was another thing. What kind of education is needed to bring like an internal change, not just something that's placed on you from the outside, but how do you make that an inside-out change? And how do we make the disciple-making movement one that is handled by the diaspora? So it was really brought up this amazing point of how does the diaspora partner with the diaspora for the diaspora? And so how does the future of our ethnic church relate in that way to the mission movement of the church in general? And fourthly, the question of what is your vision of the church 25 years from now, and how does it align with those of the researchers? We didn't quite get to that question so much, but we just shared some closing thoughts of how when the gospel is really embodied in these ethnic churches, how can we then, again, reach out more globally? We had this vision shared of the ethnic church being a place where churches can work together intra-church wise, and then really reach out into the world. And so how can the diaspora work with the diaspora to reach the diaspora? That was kind of the vision of the church that had come out. So that was us.
Thank you very much. Very fruitful discussions, and also some questions that you have left with us. And those questions are the questions that we have to explore together for the future. Thank you very much. And next group, Beth.
Like Sarah, I hope I can read that far away. Our first comment was, I should say that I'm going to report on all the questions together, because as we were talking, they were overlapping. So the first thing we commented on was that it confirmed a lot of what we had already experienced or had thought ourselves, but didn't have the data to back up. A lot of questions were around the disenfranchisement of the second generation or the English ministry group in the churches and the things that contribute to that. And that was a complicated conversation, because some of it had to do with things like the ethnic language group tends to meet at the church more than once a week. So they would have more ownership of the building, for example. We had some conversation around Charles Fensham had a good way of explaining it. It's the missionary that goes to another culture and really only feels at home on the plane because they're not really comfortable in either after they've lived a significant amount of time in both. So that was a good image for us to have, but I think it speaks to the reality of some of our ministers as well as some of the people in the pews and in lay leadership in the congregations. The challenges of the greeting patterns came up in one of Namsoon's points. And those are the things that are harder even to recognize. So if we want to welcome people and we want people to be comfortable, that's often a first impression, but those things go under the radar screen. So she gave the example of bowing. Well, someone who grew up in Canada may not even know that that exists as a politeness thing. So how do we get at some of those things so that people are even aware of what the expectations might be, or that they might be offending them? We had a question about how have we looked at the data from other immigrant churches that came to Canada much earlier, the German church, the Dutch church? Have we looked at and what are the similarities and the differences there? That was a question. There was a denominational difference. So most of the interviewees never mentioned belonging to the PCC. They didn't see that as their identity. That was and just the length of time that it takes for 1.5 generation people to be comfortable being, I guess, Canadian, there was a comment that in the research, nobody said in 25 years they wanted to become a Canadian church. So they said multicultural, and someone named that as being aspirational because there wasn't really any concrete data around what does multicultural mean? How would we know that we got there? It was very aspirational. Yeah. I think I've covered most of it. Some desire that this research be shared beyond, that they thought that the research that had been done and that we heard today would be really helpful to be spread more broadly, particularly in the congregations that we have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have a history about German church and Dutch church, the differences, and we also mentioned that after many years, the Germans and Dutch, they can say nobody sees them as German or nobody sees them as Dutch, but Asians always look like Asians. So they, that's again the difference that we experience. So a little bit more complicated there. So thank you very much. Okay, next group. Yes, please.
Hi there. I'm representing this group without any stickers. Okay. We came up with just very simple little answer for each questions. We spend most of the time on our discussion anyways. First question is about the presentation. Through the presentation, what was the new learning for our group? We found out that every church is serving the same Lord, and they all have the similar questions and problems as well, and challenges and struggles as well. So, well, I guess through this we can pray together or pray for each other because we're all facing the same difficulties and challenges here. And the second question, what findings for the research gave us hope for our church? We found out that since most of our members are from Taiwanese church, we found out that through the research report, we found that Taiwanese churches are more flexible in terms of thinking about the future planning, development planning, and different kind of aspect, or directions for planning for development. And third, has the presentation inspired additional questions? Okay, here, this is the main thing we've been discussing. It's about the denominational churches. Okay, for independent churches, we don't have this kind of a problem, but in terms of denominational churches, we do facing one serious problem, which is that through the report, we see the shrinking of the Taiwanese church or Korean church or Chinese-speaking church as well. And since, because of that, the amount of offering is decreasing as well. Therefore, the finance of the local church is getting worse and worse as well. But however, our church, the property belongs to the presbytery. We have no cash in hands. So thinking about when we're about to hire a pastor or a minister, we emphasize on the ethnical part instead of the EM part. So if that's the case, how would the EM English ministry get their English-speaking pastor to do the ministry for them? So I think this problem I'm going to just throw back to I don't know, presbytery or Knox College to think about it. And then the fourth question is about how does the vision of our church in 25 years? We came up with the same, the same solution as for most of the groups, as Reverend Beth just mentioned. We're aiming for multicultural and multilingual church instead of a Canadian church. Why is that? Because Taiwan is a place for multicultural and different races or different ethnic group of people. And Canada is the same as well, because we have a lot of immigrants from all over places. It's a very similar situation for Taiwan and between Taiwan and Canada as well. So in 25 years, if we were going to think about the future development or future goal of our church, the only thing we can think of is that we still keep our own culture in the church, and in addition of that, we will work on the English ministry as well, which means that now we have TM, Taiwanese ministry, we have EM, English ministry, and the next goal for my church will be for Mandarin ministry. Yeah, that's for my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the immigration policy also affects the ethnic congregation very much. For example, Korean churches in Canada, from 1973 to 1975, a lot of immigrants came. So church grew tremendously. But from 1977 and on, there was no immigration whatsoever. And so they started focusing on the English-speaking ministry quite a bit. But during that time, United States, 30,000 people came to the United States every year, and 3 main cities, LA, Chicago, and New York. So they didn't really build English-speaking congregation during that time. So Canada was the first before the US. Now, all the immigration for Koreans and Taiwanese and Cantonese, we don't have immigration anymore. People go back rather than coming here. Only a group that comes here is that Mandarin speaking. So Mandarin church is growing, and so they are talking about doing a Mandarin service. And Cantonese is shrinking, and then Koreans, and then the Cantonese are shrinking. And then with the shrinking of the church, we have problem with the finance. That they have a mortgage and also maintain the building and the ministry, and all that is a problem. Also, usually, the general pattern is ethnic group gives more offering than the English-speaking group. When you look at the statistics, the data, the ethnic group gives more than English-speaking group. So focus seems to be on the ethnic group more than English group. So a lot of the things that are going on here, a very interesting phenomenon. So in the future, next 10 years, 25 years, we don't know what's going to be like the immigration policy or situation here in Canada. Next group.
Our group is the Mandarin group. but I'm an English pastor in the Chinese church. So I think we have some good discussion there. The things that surprises us, I found that personally, I'm very surprised that the average age of the second generation interview is 39 years old. Because in my congregation, half of my congregations are under the age of 25. And I don't know if they interview any high school kids or college kids, because many of the kids that are leaving the church are college kids and or finish in young adults. That's one question. And also, we were very surprised that so many English congregation want to be a lifetime member of the church, which I found very surprising, because a lot of people from my congregation will come to me and ask me about they're thinking about changing churches. And usually what I do is I challenge them. I don't prevent them from going, but I challenge them. All right. What gives you hope for our church? I found that one thing is very interesting about the service, talk about how the second generation, they value their culture and their language, the family atmosphere. And I agree, because the English congregation, actually, they really do not want to leave the church, be honest with you. They're actually looking for reasons to stay. The question is that, do we give them reason to stay? And I think that is always the question. And but I do feel that it is a hope for the future, is that, we're not trying to so worry about them leaving, and I think that's a question we always talk about, how to keep them in the church. But is that the real issue, to keep them in the church? Number 3, questions. We have somebody ask this question. I think we dealt with this before, is that why is second generation leaving the church? And what's the reason behind them leaving the church? And if they do leave the church, if they go to another church, or or just stop going to the church, and what is the reason behind that? Should we kind of look at it and deal with that? And I think 3 years ago we kind of addressed that issue. Okay. The last one. Do you agree or disagree that about the future of the Asian churches? And honestly, I do agree. I think in 25 years, we call it a multicultural church. I think it has to happen. But the only thing is that my feeling is that, we're not going to be there. None of us will be there, probably. I mean, some of you will. I won't be there. But I think the key is this. The key is that I think we need to also look at the process and how to get there. And maybe we should look at maybe what's going to happen in 10 years. And we talk about things like, changing the name of the church and taking out Chinese or Korean to make it into a community church, where it's for the community. And we talk about like the concept of a kingdom mindset, especially for the senior pastor. And we talk about intentionality, is that we need to be very intentional in building that type of church, instead of just stay where we are today. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next group.
Thank you. I know I won't be able to see it, so I know we have very little time, so I'll try and go as quickly as I can. I'm representing the wonderful group of the Bumblebees, and we've had a very profound conversation. I don't know if I could do justice to it, but let's see what happens. What did we learn? Some of us felt that we learned that, and we were happy to learn that the lay and the ministers both desire a multi-ethnic church. And we also learned from the study that that there's a desire to be a community serving and a missional church, which opened some of our eyes as well. What findings give us hope? One was that the EM and that the ethnic congregations envision together a multi-ethnic church once once again. And one of the greater things was the nature of the study itself was that it was indication that the EM wanted their voices to be heard and that they participated in the overall dialogue of the church. Additional questions we've had quite a few. So one question we had, I think, was touched upon by a previous group, which is why do we hire pastors or ministers outside of Canada? Another profound questions were, we were looking at the gifts of the English-speaking congregations, but what are the gifts of the first-generation churches that can also help flourish the church? And there was also a question of ethnic congregations and what they saw in women ministers in their roles in the congregation and how that looks like through the findings. And if the English-speaking congregation becomes the dominant church, we were even talking about what would be the next challenges that would bubble up. Would the challenges of culture still be in our radar, or is just this an immediate issue? Our vision of the church 25 years from now, we really didn't have a chance to go to that question, but we found the study's metaphor of the key to be very profound. And one question we asked is, so when is a good time for us to pass the key over? And another question related to the 25-year vision is, what makes the second generation unique, and how can we utilize this unique character for the flourishing of the church?
Thank you very much. By having ethnic churches, I think in terms of evangelism, we have reached out more people. A lot of Koreans and Taiwanese and Chinese, they were not necessarily Christians back in their homeland, but when they came to Canada, they became Christians. So for evangelical purpose, the ethnic churches did a great job, and also in other things too. So next group. You're the last one? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I'm the last one. I'll just put it here, use it for now, and then post it. We had a really good, Casey, I mean, we had all the answers to your questions, Casey. Yeah, you're good. Okay. Number one, we were sort of surprised that a lot of EM ministers born outside of Canada, 60% or something. And there was an answer there, Casey. Probably first generation has sort of mentality of more zeal or passion or commitment, so that it's a transitional stage, first generation to second generation in that sense. So that kind of discussion was there. And then why Korean first generation church members moving around? So there was an answer or discussion that our Korean church's history is relatively shorter than Chinese or other ethnic groups. So survival, it is more about survival. We need to survive in many ways. So that can be the factor. So number two, EM wanted to be with their first generation, as Joe mentioned, so that there's a hope. If we treat second generation equal or more embracing and try to, make them leaders, then there's a hope. So we share that. And multicultural direction. One person in our group said that we need to know the understanding what really multiculturalism is all about. Not for the sake of just putting everybody here, but what is the core value? What is the base for that? And in that sense, John Visser devotion, mystery of gospel, it really setting the tone. So we share that. And the key image of key mother to daughter-in-law. We are all Korean speaking group, and we have 5-6 ministers. And one person said that women's leadership, not just changing the head, not changing the top level. What about grassroots? What about the real people? We need to educate women more in a real way. So that was so inspiring, encouraging. And also mother to daughter-in-law, kind of that passing on. Like we envision that it's like a session. Don't treat second gen, third generation like a child. But when you give your key to your daughter-in-law, some mothers will give it to her right away. Some mothers will hold it until her death, something like that. But can we have that more graceful, and that kind of suggestions was there. And lastly, in late 25 years later, ethnic church, one minister said that, yeah, it will be ethnic church. And it is up to the leaders, what they believe, what they envision. The leaders, according to them, their belief and philosophy, the church will shape. So leaders are very important, what we believe and what we envision. So that's our discussion.
Thank you very much. Now we'll have a break. It's at 4:35. So I have a break for 15 minutes and we'll come back. 4:50? Yeah, okay, 4:50 they come back? Okay, 4:50 we'll come back. And think about it, we'll have a more in-depth presentation of panelists, plus you'll have another discussion. This time, it'll be more in-depth discussion. Whatever you discuss together, we'll go deeper in the next session. So it is very exciting day today that we try to understand where we are and where we want to go. And to go where we want to go, what are the things that we need to do? So I hope that our panel discussion become a little bit more real or future-oriented, hopeful. So that's what we are going to discuss. So come back 10 to 5.